Hello friends, this is Jim with Science Talk. I'm going to discuss with you something that's probably been under the radar. Definitely not reported pretty much anywhere. And that's geoengineering. And in this case I'm going to be talking about solar geoengineering, but we're going to talk overall about geoengineering. Before I get to that, allow me to remind you to please subscribe to my channel, please share my work, please have other people subscribe as well. Hit the bell so you know when I drop a video. Please support the work that I do, the information that I share with you. You can do so by going to patreon.com/Science Talk with Jim Massa, and for as little as $3 a month or more, if you're so inclined, you can support the work that I do, the important information that I share with you. Okay. Overall, what is geoengineering? Geoengineering, in essence, is humans doing something to manipulate nature to try and control or effect a certain outcome. Kind of see where this is going. I'll give you an example from my field of oceanography. There's the issue of, well, we want to draw down CO2 in the atmosphere. So let's seed the ocean with iron. Iron is a micronutrient required by phytoplanktons. Iron in solution is not very prevalent in the oceanic waters. So literally it's going to be iron filings. Let's just throw a pile of that out there. That will go into solution. There's the micronutrients that the phytoplanktons can get, and oh boy, they're off and running. They will, as they photosynthesize, they'll draw down CO2. This will increase productivity, and so on. On paper, it sounds great, but you know the old saying is there's theory and then there's practicality. This turned out to be a disaster. There were so many things that were not anticipated. There's a shocker. And with the result that, I won't get into the details, but it just turned out to be horrendously bad. And that's kind of going to be my take on any such geoengineering scheme. I'm working on a story I just saw about how some scientists want to prevent the Antarctic ice sheets from melting. They want to build walls and tunnels. Wow. I read that and my first thought was, please share whatever foliage you are smoking, because it's a doozy. But that story I'll be working on, and that should be coming out sometime. So, there's a gentleman by the name of Dave Wigington who has been basically doing a lot of research into geoengineering and has been kind of sounding the alarm bells on this. Right now, the story that I wish to share with you is about solar geoengineering. Quote, "Too uncertain to go ahead yet." Well, good. I'm glad they're exercising some restraint. "The world must urgently agree controls on solar geoengineering to weigh up its possible risks and benefits before deciding to go ahead." So, as I said, geoengineering is basically an artificial means to modify the climate system. And that's basically what geoengineering is in essence. Dave Wigington runs a website. It's called geoengineeringwatch.org. Geoengineering Watch is all one word, no hyphens or spaces or underscores or anything. Geoengineeringwatch.org. So, what do they want to do? Progress to deploy solar engineering experimental technology designed to protect the world against the impact of the changing climate must pause, a former United Nations climate expert says, arguing that governments need to create effective guardrails against any unforeseen risks. Janos Pastor, who served as a UN Assistant Secretary General on Climate Change, basically made a speech at Arizona State University to warn the world that governments are largely ignoring the fundamental question of who should control geoengineering and how. Well, I would say there's one other important question. Should this even be done in the first place? There are so many unforeseen circumstances, unknown factors, unpredictable outcomes and consequences, that every time humans try to manipulate nature, it always ends up blowing up in our faces. It just does. To think we can control nature is hubris at its highest level. Hey, I'm all for science and scientific research. And I'm all for understanding systems. But to think you can sit there and can control this complicated system, all the interactions of this planet, that is really going for it. Now, one of the, and I'm going to kind of do a little sidestep here, because Dave Wigington has done some, he's done some important works here. And the work he's done, he's brought attention to, is the chemical chemtrailing. You might see these high-level jets, and then there's these long, what you might think of contrails. They're not contrails. Contrails, yes, they do form, but they look different in the sky. What we're seeing, and if you look at it, lots of times you see these parallel lines, these white parallel lines in the sky. And this is chemtrailing. And basically, it's a reflective material that's being released, aluminum silicate. And the idea is, the aluminum silicate will reflect sunlight back into space, reducing the heat coming into the planet. Well, the problem, therefore, is, that may work, but eventually that aluminum silicate is going to precipitate out. It's going to precipitate out, it's going to land on the ground, it gets into the soils. Plants absorb this stuff, and this aluminum silicate then turns around and kills the plants. Because once it gets into their roots, it prevents any further uptake of any nutrients, water, what have you. The plants die. This is what I mean by consequences that were unforeseen, or even if it's unintended, it's still dire consequences. So that's what Dave Wigington has concentrated his efforts on. So, Mr. Pastor's warning comes as researchers prepare for what is thought to be the world's first outdoor experiment on stratospheric aerosol injection. SAI, stratospheric aerosol injection. Basically, this is a type of solar engineering. And basically, what do they want to inject? Hydrogen sulfide, sulfur dioxide, H2SSO2. Pastor heads the Carnegie Climate Geoengineering Governance Initiative, something called C2G2, which is an initiative of the New York-based Carnegie Council for Ethics and International Affairs. The initiative wants solar geoengineering deployment to be delayed, good for them, until the risks and potential benefits are better known and assessed. Solar geoengineering does not remove carbon from the atmosphere, and so it can only be used to supplement action to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It can never replace the action. Many risks and unknowns remain, Hasdor says, including possible harm to the environment and to other situations. With SAI aerosols, when they are sprayed into the stratosphere to reflect the sun's radiation and cool the Earth's fast, okay, that is the thinking. It might take another 15 to 20 years for the technology to be developed further along. So obviously it's too soon to decide. Okay. So that's one type of geoengineering. Other geoengineering ideas, which may be nearing testing. Proposals to refreeze parts of the Arctic and to brighten clouds at sea. Now, if you refreeze the parts of the Arctic, then what you're doing is you're increasing the albedo. Albedo is basically the sunlight being reflected back into space. Right now, as more of the Arctic Ocean remains liquid, instead of being covered with sea ice, when you have open water absorbs the heat that comes in, warms up the ocean and all that kind of stuff, and I've discussed that before. Whereas if you have ice there, the ice reflects the heat. The higher the albedo, the more reflectance back into space. So trying to refreeze the Arctic is an attempt to increase albedo. Trying to brighten clouds at sea is sort of the same idea. Increase reflectance back into space. So there's that one. I mentioned about let's build a wall on Antarctic's ice sheet. Let's build tunnels. All this other kind of stuff. Here's another one for you. Scientists want to throw salt into the atmosphere. Sprinkling large amounts of salt in the atmosphere could stave off climate change, a group of researchers has proposed. Because salt is highly reflective, it could potentially reflect sunlight back into outer space, helping to cool the Earth. This is something that was written in a report that was presented at the Lunar and Planetary Science Conference in Texas. Other climate scientists aren't so sure. You think? Hey, this is obviously geoengineering, which is, as I've defined it for you before, a deliberate attempt to change the environment. Okay. Now, Michael Mann, he is a distinguished professor of meteorology at Penn State. He's the gentleman that came up with the hockey stick graph that was featured in Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth film. But the hockey stick graph basically tracks increased CO2 levels, increased temperature level, and we see a sharp spike that occurred right around the start of the Industrial Revolution, where levels were increasing gradually, and then bang, and the graph looks like a hockey stick. Well, he was very diplomatic. He states, it's an interesting idea. Most of these geoengineering schemes, though potentially appealing at the surface, are seen to be fraught with potential unintended consequences when you look at them in more detail. Very diplomatic way of saying, are you nuts? So, here are some of the consequences throwing salt in the atmosphere. That's eventually going to fall back to the earth. What will that do to the soil? What will that do to salinity of any water body? Ocean, freshwater lake, estuarine systems. That will change the salinity. Now, if you have an organism that lives in an estuary, chances are the organism is what we call euryhaline, meaning that it can tolerate a wide range of salinities. So it may not be affected. But if you have organisms out in the open ocean that are stenohaline, meaning they cannot tolerate a wide range of salinity. Their salinity values have to be within a very narrow range. if you change the salinity, increasing it, it's going to present osmoregulatory problems for these organisms that could result in their death. As an example. Or you get salt into the soil. What does that do to the plants? So this is what I mean about unintended consequences. You have to be really careful. So, we've got aerosols, we've got aluminum silicate, alumina. I gave you the example of iron in the ocean. Now we have the salt here. I told you about what they want to do in Antarctica. This is all geoengineering. And like everything else, you really must think things through. So, here's the other problem with the salt issue. The salt's reflectance has only been measured in a laboratory setting. They haven't even tested it in situ. It may not be as reflective as they thought. More problems. So, this is basically, even if they were to deploy this, even if it were to have some benefit, it's only palliative. It's not a solution. So, my opinion. Well, I think you already got an idea of my opinion. Overall, geoengineering is just not a good idea. There's simply too many variables, too many unknowns to consider. Atmospheric, precipitation patterns, how they might change. Other interactions, what does it do to organisms? What happens when this material returns to the ground via precipitation, and so on. So, again, I will state this again, I will close with this. Humans are always messing with nature, thinking they can control nature, and all they do, every single time, it comes back to bite us in the ass big time, making things worse. Thank you for watching. Please share the video. Please share all my videos. Please subscribe. Thank you.